playfully told everyone he couldn't last. He seduced my sister and made sure I heard it all. Truly, I didn't see this coming. I was joking with him. It wasn't anything serious. It was something to roll eyes at and move on from. But he didn't roll his eyes. He didn't move on. He got even. And I truly don't deserve that no matter what. I was blindsided, although I know that it was kind of my fault. I drove him into seducing my sister, but he went far with it. He shouldn't have, and now I don't even know what to make of it. Benny and I had been dating for almost 3 years. It wasn't a perfect relationship, but it was great. We weren't the overly romantic type that were always all over each other, and we weren't the kind of couple who fought all the time either. We were just people who love each other enough to exist side by side and day after day. Sadly, I thought I knew him, and I thought he knew me. And I thought the way we talked to each other and the way we joked was normal. I had always been the type of person to run my mouth without thinking, but not in a mean way, just in a this is how I talk way. I said exactly how they were, although I did add a little joke to it, and I laughed at things that didn't seem like a big deal, and I didn't hold back when telling stories to my friends. That's just how I was. I never saw myself as someone who talked down to others, even when I was told. I didn't believe it because that was never the intention. But looking back now, maybe I did, but it wasn't deliberate. I think I was the type to say things that stuck with people longer than I meant them to. Maybe I said things that embarrassed people without meaning to. The thing is, when it comes to my relationship, I made a lot of remarks, and Benny never told me if I made him feel that way. He never gave me a look that said I took it too far. He never pushed back, and he never told me to stop. So I thought everything was fine. We had a friend group that we hung out with pretty often. It was made of both his friends and mine who got along well enough. We'd meet up at any of our friends' place or ours, play games, drink, talk about random things. It was fun. That day, we were all at a friend's apartment, and as we were discussing, the topic changed to delivery services. People were complaining about how expensive they were getting and how delivery guys sometimes just tossed packages at the door and left. I wasn't really thinking when I started talking about Benny. I told them about how he had struggled to carry a package we got recently. I mentioned how he couldn't even get it off the ground and how he looked like he was about to throw his back out trying. Our friends laughed and Benny laughed. He even joked about how heavy it was. So for me, it was nothing other than just another casual conversation. But later that night, after we were done hanging out and were about to be on our way home any moment from then, one of my friends pulled me aside. She told me I had a habit of belittling Benny in public. She was careful with her words because I think she wasn't sure how I'd react. Initially, I didn't take her seriously. It was obvious that she was overthinking things. Benny laughed along with me, didn't he? If something actually bothered him, he'd say it. He wasn't the kind of person to let things fester. Still, the way she said it stuck with me. I didn't think I was the kind of person who talked down to my own boyfriend, but what if I was? So immediately, I looked over at Benny that night, and as I was watching him play around with our friends as he was trying to bid them goodbye, he looked fine. He looked happy. If there was a problem, I would know. So there was no need to panic, and I was all cleared. So I don't understand where that friend of mine got such an idea from. A few days after that night with our friends, Benny was outside trying to help our neighbor push his car. The engine wouldn't start, and the guy needed a little extra force to get it moving. Benny wasn't exactly the strongest person, and so I playfully told him not to faint while trying to do something he couldn't do. It was playful, just like my tone, and I didn't think anything of it. He laughed, the neighbor laughed, and to prove that it was all a silly joke, Benny actually managed to push the car forward. It was one of those small moments in life that came and went without a second thought. I didn't stop to consider how he might have felt about what I said. I didn't think about whether it annoyed him, embarrassed him, or made him feel a certain way. In my head, I was just being funny. I had always been like that, so quick with a comment, fast with a joke, and I was never the type to take things too seriously. Now, every time I think about it, I don't know why I never noticed the change. There's a chance that it happened gradually, or it was there all along, and I was just too caught up in myself to see it. Benny wasn't the type to argue. If something upset him, he either waved it off or let it sit inside him without saying a word, and that made it easy for me to assume everything was fine. I had never been the kind of girlfriend who walked on eggshells around her boyfriend. I spoke freely. I said what came to mind. That was just how I was. And because Benny never said anything about it, I kept going. I thought we had an understanding and that if something really got to him, he would tell me. But I was wrong. The thing about those kinds of small moments is that they don't seem important when they happen. They blend into the background and get lost in the habit of everyday life. I didn't think twice about that joke, just like I hadn't thought twice about the story I told at the gathering with our friends. To me, I was a fun person with very sassy jokes, and I didn't know that I was digging my own grave. In my mind, these were normal things. I'm allowed to joke, so I didn't expect him to take it personally and go all the way to get revenge on me in the most brutal of ways. I never stopped to consider that it didn't seem that way to him, and maybe he got hurt by my words. And that was my mistake. I kept on being the person I had always been, throwing out remarks without a second thought. It didn't cross my mind that these small remarks were adding up, and that they were shaping the way he saw himself, the way he saw me, and the way he saw us. There were times after that where I could have noticed something was off. For example, the way he got quiet sometimes when I made a joke about him in front of other people, and the way he started taking longer to respond when I teased him about something, and the way he started to withdraw from me even when everything felt normal on the surface. But I didn't notice or I wasn't bothered. I thought everything was fine. One evening, Benny and I went out together. Just the two of us. It wasn't anything fancy, it was just a simple night out. We hadn't had one in a while, so it felt nice. So at some point, he leaned in close and mentioned that a girl was staring at him. It wasn't the first time he had said something like that, and I had never taken it seriously. Benny wasn't the kind of guy who turned heads everywhere he went. He was decent looking, but he wasn't someone women would go out of their way to notice. I thought he was just trying to be funny, or maybe fishing for a reaction. I looked at the girl, and well, she was classy, well-dressed, polished, and if I was being honest, more beautiful than me. She was the kind of woman who seemed put together in a way that took effort, and the kind of woman who probably wouldn't look at Benny twice. So I laughed and made a joke about how he was overestimating himself. There was no way a woman like that would be interested in him. He wasn't the type of guy she would go for, and he definitely wouldn't know what to do with a woman like that, even if she was interested. He won't be able to handle her. Benny didn't react much. He just smiled. He didn't argue. He just kept quiet and just let it go while I kept laughing. I wasn't trying to be mean. It was just the way I was. If he had told me a guy was staring at me, I would have maybe at least believed him because that sounded a little bit like the truth, although I would have still made a joke about it because that's who I am. That was the dynamic we had. I didn't notice anything off about him after that. He didn't act upset, and he didn't seem bothered. We continued with our night, and I forgot all about it. It was just another blink in time that was unimportant, and it passed by without a thought. I never considered that he might have taken it differently than I did. I never thought that even if he wasn't serious about the girl, he might have wanted me to say something else. Something that made him feel good instead of just saying things made him appear like he was being ridiculous. It didn't even cross my mind that probably he had smiled because he was getting used to it, that there's a possibility that he had stopped expecting anything else from me. Then the night where all hell broke loose was when we had friends over. The gathering became more like a small party with drinks flowing, and the energy in the room was relaxed and easygoing. Benny and I had hosted before, and I always enjoyed these kinds of nights. There was something lovely and comforting about being surrounded by our friends, sharing stories, playing games, and letting loose for a few hours. Benny was never the loudest person in the room, but he always blended in well. He never tried too hard to be the center of attention, but he was sociable enough to keep up. Also, these kinds of nights weren't really his thing, but he never complained when I planned them, because all our friends take turns doing the same. So he'd help set everything up, refill drinks, and clean up afterward. He was reliable like that, and I loved that about him. At some point during the gathering, someone suggested we should play a game to spice things up, and we all agreed. Different game suggestions came up, but then we voted and got to play one. We had all played something similar before, but not this particular one. I guess everyone was just curious about each other's celebrity crush. The question was simple. If your partner allowed it, which celebrity would you be intimate with? It wasn't anything serious. It was just a silly discussion meant to get people talking and turn on the heat. So no one took it to heart, and people threw out names, laughing, teasing, and commenting on each other's choices. Since we were all friends, I think that made people feel comfortable enough to open up. When it got to Benny, he answered without hesitation. It wasn't a surprising choice, nothing extreme or out of the ordinary. Just a well-known celebrity. I won't mention the name, though, but it was someone who was conventionally attractive, famous, someone anyone in his position might have picked. I don't know why it was so funny to me. I think it was because of how confidently he said it, so I burst out laughing. A loud one, for that matter. Because of how loud the laugh was, it took over the room for a second. That laugh made people stop what they're doing and look to see what's so funny. The conversation and game paused. The room didn't go completely silent, but it was quiet enough that I knew people were waiting for me to explain myself. They weren't looking at Benny. They were looking at me. I didn't hesitate. I said what was on my mind without filtering any of it. I made a joke about how Benny wouldn't even be able to talk to someone like that, let alone win her over. That it was laughable to think he'd have any chance at all. People chuckled. Someone made a noise like they were surprised I had said it out loud. I kept going. I said there was no way he could satisfy a woman like that, because he hadn't even been able to satisfy me. I also made it known that it was because he couldn't last long in bed, and he was like a 5-second man. I was joking, of course, because Benny was an avid lover. I said it without thinking about what it actually meant, without stopping to consider how it sounded. Some of our friends reacted, while some laughed louder than others. Someone even repeated what I said like they couldn't believe I had put it that way. Benny was right there, but I wasn't thinking about him. It was so selfish of me to be that way. I was only thinking about the people in the room, about how I had made them laugh. That was where my focus was. That's why I didn't stop there. I said it was a miracle he had even been able to get me and date me, and that it made no sense that someone like me had ended up with someone like him, that he had no game, no charm, no ability to win a woman like that or any woman at all, that the only reason he was with me was because I had pitied him. This earned more laughter and more reactions. Our friends started nudging each other, shaking their heads, and covering their mouths in surprise. It was one of those times in a conversation where someone says something so unexpected that it becomes the highlight of the night. So I told him, in front of everyone, that he couldn't, that he wasn't capable, that if he thought for 1 second he had that kind of power, he was delusional. I didn't stop to think about how Benny was taking it. I was so stupid to keep going, and I didn't stop to look at his face, to see if he was laughing along, or if he was ignoring it like all the other times. Just then, Benny shocked me and made sure I regretted my words, because that was the moment he stood up. I was scared for a second, but then I noticed that he was not angry, and there was no sign that he was upset in the way I had expected when he rose to his feet. So I felt relaxed, and since he didn't storm out or make a scene immediately, I thought I was safe. He just looked at me, looked me right in the eye, and said that he could get any girl he wanted and satisfy them. His tone wasn't defensive. It wasn't a joke. It was obvious to everyone that he was serious. I told him that he should sit down before he embarrasses himself, and he repeated his words again and asked me not to say something I'd regret. I didn't get it then, so it was more like I dared him when I said again that he couldn't, and even if he tried, he would end up humiliating himself. And that was a fact, and I am not going to regret anything. That was when he smirked, the kind of smirk I had never seen on his face before. And then he walked out. At first, I thought he was just leaving to cool off. I figured he'd be back in an hour or two, once the sting of embarrassment wore off. Everyone left not long after Benny stepped out, since it became awkward for them to stay. So after they left, an hour passed, then 2, then the rest of the night, Benny didn't return. I called him, straight to voicemail. I texted him. No response. The next morning I woke up alone. I was expecting to see him next to me, thinking he might have crawled back in after I fell asleep, but his side of the bed was untouched. His things were still where he had left them. No sign that he had come home at all. I tried calling again. Same result. By the time the second day passed, I started to feel very uneasy. I wasn't frustrated or feeling guilty. I was just not comfortable because he had never disappeared like this before. He had never ignored my calls, my messages, or my attempts to reach out. So I asked his friends. No one had seen him. No one knew where he was. The third day became too much to bear. I wasn't even sure if I was worried about him or if I was just desperate for him to respond. I just needed to hear from him, to know that he was okay, to know that I hadn't pushed him so far that he was never coming back. Then I got a message. I was so happy when I received the notification thinking it was Benny, and yes, it was him, but as I picked my phone up to check it out, it was just a video, and it was a one-time view video. I hesitated before opening it. I don't know why, because it didn't feel right. I could tell before I even pressed play that whatever I was about to see, I wasn't prepared for it. Because why would Benny send me a video that can only be watched once, and coupled with the fact that he had disappeared for days, and this was all I got for all the worries? It was strange. At first I prayed and hoped he wasn't being held captive, with someone demanding a ransom, and that this video was about that. I was freaking out, but then I had to still open it, so I pressed play anyways. The video started in a room that was a bit dark. It was not ours, but it looked familiar. Then I looked closely. Benny was in it, sitting across from someone, speaking in a voice I barely recognized. It was his voice, though, but it was just that it wasn't the way he usually talked. It wasn't the way he spoke to me, or to his friends, to anyone I had ever seen him interact with. It was smooth, low, confident in a way that made my stomach turn, and the person he was speaking to was my sister. I stopped breathing for a second. I was out of it. My stomach churned, and I felt sick suddenly. She was sitting across from him, and she was leaning in slightly. Judging from her expression, she was focused and was completely drawn into whatever he was saying. And he was saying all the right things, the words that I had never heard from him before, and things I never thought he was capable of saying. He was charming without even trying. It was a big slap on my face because that video literally portrayed him as the kind of man I had always joked he wasn't. And my sister was falling for it. She laughed and even tucked her hair behind her ear. She bit her lip. I was so bitter watching that, and then before I could even process what I was watching or understand what was happening or what this was about, they kissed. I nearly lost my mind and my phone dropped from my hand. I physically couldn't hold it and I couldn't keep watching. I had already seen enough. My hands were shaking and my mind scrambled to make sense of what I had just watched. Benny and my sister. Benny and my sister. Like, what the hell was that? My body felt cold, and my face was numb, my heart hammering so loudly that I could barely hear myself think. I had refused to think that it was exactly what it was. The video must have been an accident, or maybe someone manipulated it to hurt, and I was shouting, no, this can't be real, and that the video was intentional and aimed at hurting me. So I forced myself to pick up my phone again. My hands were barely steady enough to unlock it. So instantly I picked it up and tried to open it. Another message came in. A text this time. Just 5 words. Guess who lasted 3 rounds? I stared at the message, and my entire body was going rigid. My chest tightened and my head felt like it was about to split open. Now I was sure it wasn't a mistake, and it wasn't just about the video or about what he had done. It was about why. This wasn't some impulsive mistake. This wasn't some random act of betrayal. This was revenge, deliberate and calculated, and it worked. Until then, I have not recovered. This was just so reckless and cruel of Benny. Yes, maybe I was wrong to say all those things in front of our friends, but still he would have just confronted me, and we would have found a way around it, not him proving to me in the coldest way ever. This is just pure wickedness, and my heart is broken. I don't know how to move on with this. Update. I am weakened by the reality of things, and I am still in shock after everything unraveled in that way. So I guess this is my update. I wasn't even planning on making one, but I feel like I need to. Not because I'm looking for advice or sympathy, but because I've been sitting with everything for a while now, and I just need to get it out. Benny hasn't contacted me since that last message. No calls, no texts, nothing. He's completely gone from my life, but the mess he left behind isn't. I don't even know where to begin, maybe with my sister. I didn't respond to Benny's message. I couldn't. I don't even think I could breathe properly after reading it. But a few hours later, my sister called me. I didn't pick up. She called again and again and again. I finally answered, not because I wanted to talk to her, but because I needed to hear her voice, to know if she had any shame, any regret, anything at all. She sounded panicked. She kept saying my name over and over like she was scared of what I was going to do. She told me she was sorry. She told me it was a mistake. She told me she didn't know what she was thinking. I didn't say anything. I just listened. She said Benny had been charming, that he had known exactly what to say, exactly how to make her feel special, exactly how to make her forget that he was my boyfriend. She said she knew she had messed up, that she wished she could take it back. She kept waiting for me to say something, to yell, to cry, to do anything. I didn't. I just hung up. I didn't want to hear any of that. Then, she sent a few more messages after that. Long paragraphs. She said she thinks she loves Benny, that she doesn't know how it happened, but she can't stop thinking about him. She kept saying it was a mistake, that she wasn't thinking, and that she never meant to hurt me. But no matter how much she tried to explain, it didn't change the fact that she was still saying it, that even after everything, she still developed feelings for him. She said she wasn't telling me this to be cruel, that she just wanted to be honest since everything was already messed up. She said she didn't plan on doing anything, at least not yet, but she had to let me know, like that made it better. I didn't respond. I don't think she deserved a response, or maybe I just didn't know what to say. What was I supposed to say to something like that? Out of everyone, it had to be her. That's what made it worse, my own sister, the person I trusted the most, the person I thought I knew. And the most shocking part was I didn't even believe my sister would fall for someone like Benny. It didn't make sense to me. She was an influencer, someone with high standards. That wasn't just my opinion, it was a fact. Everyone knew it. She always made it clear what kind of man she wanted, and Benny wasn't anywhere close to that. So how did it happen? How did he go from being the guy I joked about to the guy she couldn't stop thinking about? How did he become someone she thought she loved? I couldn't wrap my head around it. And maybe that was the craziest part. Because if she could even fall for him, then maybe I had never really known her at all. The annoying thing is that I keep replaying it in my head. Not the video in particular, but everything before it. Every moment I pushed Benny, every time I joked a little too hard, every time I treated him like he wasn't someone who could hurt me. I don't think I ever really thought he would leave me or hurt me. I never thought he had it in him. And I definitely never thought he would do something like this. I really underestimated him, and now the burdens of the outcome are too much for me to carry. Some of my friends keep telling me he was cruel, that he did it just to break me, and that it wasn't about my sister, it was about revenge. And I know that. I know that if it wasn't her, it would have been someone else. But that doesn't make it any better, because it was her. And that's something I have to live with. My family knows now. My mom freaked out. She kept saying she couldn't believe my sister would do this to me. My dad hasn't said much, but I can tell he's disgusted. Not by Benny alone, but also by my thoughtless actions and how badly I treated Benny. And my sister is a mess. She keeps crying, keeps saying she didn't mean to, keeps saying she'll do anything to make it right. There is no making it right. I don't think she fully understands that. I don't think she realizes that this isn't something you just apologize for and move on from. But when she found out how everything happened, she didn't just hate me, she made sure I felt it. She reminded me that I had done something unforgivable. She didn't blame Benny anymore. Not the way I thought she would. She said it was my fault, that I was the one who pushed him to do something he never would have done, that I mocked him, humiliated him, and acted like I was better than him, and now that everything had fallen apart, I wanted to act like the victim. She said she was the real victim, that I ruined everything, that I destroyed what we had as a family, and that I didn't even deserve to feel bad about it. Those words tore me apart. They still do. She made me realize how I did everything wrong, and I had no right to blame her. I know I messed up. I know I hurt her. But I don't think I realized just how much until she looked at me like she never wanted to see me again. I haven't told many people outside of my family. A few close friends know. Some never failed to blame me, while some of them say I should blast Benny, expose him, make sure everyone knows what kind of person he is. But I don't have the energy for that, because I'm scared he could do more dangerous things to me. I deleted every picture of us, threw out his things, blocked his number, removed him from my life in every way that I could. but I can't remove him from my mind. I can't understand why I still love him, and I'm hurt that he made me think I'm the reason for all of these. I keep thinking about the way he looked at me that night, and the way he smirked before he walked out. The way he was completely calm, like he already knew exactly what he was going to do. I don't think I ever really knew him, and I think that's what hurts the most.